Hello everybody, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I would like to share my thoughts through a product spotlight of the Zen Compact by Kunwu Knives. This isn't a super old model, but it's old enough to be unfortunately discontinued. You can't even find the original listing on Kunwu's website, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure they're not planning to make any more of these. Or at least haven't released that they're going to be doing that kind of stuff. From what I remember, this wasn't a super well received model, unfortunately. There is a lot of good here, and in relation to a couple of the other knives that the wonderful Work Knife Balance lent to me, it's been a couple weeks now, sorry. But he lent me a handful of models that I have been dying to check out, and he has a huge collection of Kunwu knives. I personally have only ever experienced 3 because I bought them. I currently don't own any, but I have a new one on the way actually. So he lent me a couple knives to check out just to get the general feel, just to make some content for in the form of product spotlights. Again, these are not mine, so they didn't go through the typical couple weeks of outside carry and work use. I don't feel comfortable taking other people's knives out and about because shit can happen, and while I am very careful with my stuff and other people's stuff, I didn't want to risk anything. The only thing I did to this was took it apart, I cleaned it, I actually put a sick 17-degree edge on here. It is absolutely wonderful. We're ready to go back to work. This LMAX took a wonderful edge. It was very easy to sharpen actually, which is nice. And I can definitely see within this model the large milestone that Kunwu had made when it came to their fit and finish versus the other stuff that I've checked out, their earlier stuff. So I recently did a video on the, what was it? I forgot the name. The Orion 2 and the X Tau. It was a crossbar lock, and the Orion 2 was like a frame lock. So this is going to be a little bit more related to frame lock because, well, it is a frame lock. But I could definitely see that there are a whole lot of different fit and finish elements to this thing that put it above the other ones that I've checked out so far. So this is a very impressive model, honestly. And while there is a larger one, I definitely say that this size is definitely something that is in the sweet spot for me. I definitely do enjoy it. Again, this is the compact. There was a large one. I believe it is also discontinued, no longer to be made. But this thing isn't without its own little quirks, and I have some things to say about that. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the weight. Then we'll do 6 size comparisons. We'll talk about the hardware, just every other little thing about it, and what I think this thing could be if it is ever revisited in the future. 3.7, kind of dense for the overall size, but really not that bad. There is a lot of weight relieving internally, which is absolutely beautiful and definitely appreciated as well. The pocket clip, it is quite similar to the overall experience of the Orion 2 that I just checked out. It's kind of pinchy in the pocket, it's kind of tight. I didn't want to mess with the tension because it's not mine, and while titanium is very forgiving and easy to work with for the most part, I didn't want to mess with it. So I definitely do think that this could be redesigned the tiny bit. It looks really good, it does, but it is a little pinchy carry wise. So, and it does sit right on that relief cut, like smack in the middle. But looking at it, it doesn't look like it actually fully makes contact with the lock bar. So I don't really think it's adding any extra pressure, but because this thing is the size that it is, when you disengage, my hands naturally will rest on that lock, on that clip, and actually on that lock bar a little bit, and kind of push back on the force of me pushing, like actually trying to disengage it. So disengaging and engaging, just interacting with this thing overall, it is a little tight. So it is quite tight in there, and while everything is very smooth, very well rounded, there are no sharp edges, there are 0 hot spots to this thing, which is awesome. That's something that you can definitely expect from Kunwu knives. Their overall softening of materials and rounding off and softening corners, that's something that they are excellent at for sure. It's a little snug in there. So that was really one big comment that I wanted to make. Let's do some size comparisons. I got 6 here. Let's start with the big ones. The MSI, it absolutely dwarfs this compact Zen here. Manix 2. There's some medium ones, should be quite similar. This is CMB Maiden Axe Predator, is still a little bit longer overall. Vision FG as well, a little bit longer overall. So I suppose that the Zen's actually, excuse me, the compact Zen, I need to remember that. The compact Zen is quite compact. I don't want to call it mini, because it's not. But it's definitely a lot smaller. But in hand, it has a presence that makes me think that it's larger than stuff like, you know, this that I'm stacking it up to. So this is the FT2103, very comparable to the overall size of a standard Benchmade bug out. And this is the Spyderco Native 5 Lightweight. So hopefully those 6 knives give you guys a good visual representation of what this thing is all about and overall lengthwise, you know, while it's actually open and deployed. So let's talk more about the freaking knife, right? So T8 for the pivot, T6 for all the body and the clip. Not the biggest fan of that, but we've come to expect that Kanwu Knives has moved to all T8s all across the board, which is freaking excellent. The only thing that is T6 now on their new stuff, if you're getting one of the crossbar lock ones, the actual screws to disassemble the crossbar lock, and I believe if they have frame lock ones, that they might still be using T6 for the screw holding and the hardened steel insert and ceramic detent ball, but that's it. So for the most part, they've essentially transitioned to all T8s, which thank you so much. So many people, I'm sure, are saying the same thing as well, because it's just factually true that T8s are just, they're the way to go. They're elite, they make sense, they're less likely to strip and get fucked up, and just, again, it makes sense. There are plenty of companies out there that are on record for not really giving shit about what the community thinks when it comes to hardware. Well, that's fine. They're going to lose and gain customers regardless of what they do. So, but besides all that nonsense, we're talking about this guy right here. And one of the cool little things that Kanwu has been doing relatively early on, while the execution of it could be a little spotty sometimes, are their titanium Damascus or their Timascus pivot collars. This example, actually, it's actually a very colorful cut, a very colorful piece that they got here. It is very well executed. You can see all the different bands of color, and it is quite attractive. Gives this relatively monochromatic look overall, just a tiniest little bit of pop of color, and that's pretty cool. That should still be an optional thing that could be added when you go to checkout, because not everybody likes that kind of stuff. Not everybody cares to have, you know, the fancy schmancy materials. Somebody could genuinely want to get this design in hand just to be a work beater knife and not really care about paying extra for a little pivot collar that they just don't really care for. So personally, I think that that should be an option through checkout. I'm sure it wouldn't take much to have those separated and just throw into you know, the shipping package, and just have the person who does want to buy the Timascus pivot collar or a Timascus kit, right? Because there are some that, you know, have the clip or the back spacer or the collars or the pivot or something like that. Offer Timascus kits. Don't just include them, because not everybody's going to want them. Me personally, I love it. I think it looks great. But again, offering variety to customers, the people in the community, the people that work so hard to be able to afford cool stuff like this, they deserve variety. So that's something that definitely should be thought of, you know, moving forward. All the billboarding on the blades, that's another thing too that we've kind of come to expect from Kanwu. It's just kind of a thing that they do. A lot of people don't like it. I will say that probably most people don't like it, but it's just kind of a thing that they do. Unfortunately, I mean, for the right side of the knife, it's nice, clean, and sterile looking. But then on the left side, this is all this stuff here. I mean, the blade's still stamped. I get it. It makes sense. But Zen Compact and the whatever freaking model number, if you really need to put that somewhere else, it could have been etched or whatever, like inside of the backspacer there, or maybe like inside one of the milled out spaces inside of there. If you absolutely really need to put it on the product, it needs to go away from the blade. No one needs to see this. This is not important to know to the customer, because they're the one that spent the like $200 something on the knife. Chances are they're gonna remember what it's called because of how much it cost them. That's, again, just my opinion. I'm sure plenty of people would agree that names and billboarding and other marketing slogans and stuff do not need to be on the blade. Now, going back to the blade, this thing is a wonderful shape right here, and the execution of this blade is just freaking sweet. So you have a relatively unique sheep's footy, drop point hybrid, angry camel toe freaking knife, whatever you want to call it. It's wonderful. It's beautiful in use. Utilitarian cuts are incredible. The whole thing is canted upwards a little bit, but you don't have to do anything funky when you're actually using it, and it's incredible to use. The only thing that I will complain about are the fact that they just did a little too much when it comes to the fidget factor. I understand fidgeting with your knives. I do it constantly. My fingers are always screwed up because of how often I fidget. A lot of the times I will even be falling asleep and fidgeting with a knife. That's how often I do it, while I'm driving, while I'm sitting watching a movie, while I'm outside like in the yard watering the grass or the other plants and stuff like that. Yeah, there's a knife in my hand and I'm fidgeting with it constantly. So I know what it is to love fidgeting with your knives. And this thing does offer a lot of fidgetability, but I will say that things kind of get in the way of other things. So, talking about this thing right here, the execution of it could have been a little bit more aggressive. It is good enough if you decide that that's something you want to do constantly. That's going to be like your preferred way of deployment. You just really got to press down on it and then swipe over. It's not the most comfortable thing, definitely not, because of how soft that jimping is. The fact that they have jimping and it's pretty much spanning the whole space here, that's nice. I like that. I would have preferred if they did it, that it was a little bit more aggressive. Here on the little, maybe I wouldn't call it a micro flipper tab, but it's definitely a small flipper tab. I definitely would suggest that just pick one or the other. Doing both, they kind of get in the way. So flipper tab, the front flipper doesn't get in the way of the rear flipper tab, but because this is a smaller knife, if you have really big hands, chances are you're going to do something a little weird and it's not going to lock up all the way, or the meat of your finger may get like right behind that rear flipper tab and kind of like stop it, and it rubs against it. Not that it hurts or that it's uncomfortable or anything, but it kind of gets in the way a little bit. So I would definitely suggest to actually remove the front flipper tab and keep the rear flipper. And this is coming from a person that does not like flipper tabs. Like, I don't give a crap about rear flipper tabs. It's not my thing. It's probably the bottom of the list for deployment method. I rather have like a slip joint knife and deploy a knife like that versus a traditional flipper tab, because I'm just over flipper tabs. It's not for me. Of course, that's just a preference, but visually speaking too, I think it kind of makes things poke out in an awkward way, and it kind of ruins a lot of designs. But again, because the front flipper, the top flipper, is so poorly executed, it gets in the way if you have really large hands and you don't have the best dexterity and you're scared of this thing flopping out of your hand while you're trying to do a cool little front flip. I would definitely suggest get rid of the top flipper, front flipper, whatever you would call it, and just keep the rear flipper. Because it is shaped the way that it is, you do have an extremely comfortable resting position for a forward choke up grip. And you do have, you know, this whole jimped space that it is part of that front flipper, top flipper. The jimping continues essentially, except for this one little bald spot right there. But it is the same level of traction. There's not much to it. It feels nice, right? And along with the crown spine, it looks good as well. But yeah, I think just having the rear flipper is the way to go. Pinch grip, if that's something you want to do, that's excellent as well. And really, besides that, there's not much else. I think that this is a model that absolutely deserves to stay in the current Kunwu line, that they can do things with this still. It just needs to be given the special sauce that they've been giving to their new stuff, right? So make things thin, lightweight, a little bit more precise, to make things sharper when they need to be sharper, like jimping, for instance. Still continue to do the wonderful execution of, you know, chamfering and softening all the bevels and the edges that don't need to be sharp. Absolutely. Maybe revise the clip a tad bit. They're already doing all T8s for pretty much everything else, body hardware wise, so that's excellent. So this particular model, the blade shape, the plunge on here, I got no complaints about it. I think it's plenty good. Their stock thickness, I think it is appropriate for what it is. It's not super crazy. It is about, you know, average thickness. That tip is definitely a lot thinner than other stuff I've checked out from Kunwu, and it is very well executed, that's for sure. And the thickness behind the edge, it is definitely thinner than majority of stuff that I've checked out from Kunwu so far. So honestly, using this thing, it's been awesome moving through material. It is extremely comfortable in hand. It is a wonderful little thing to use. But when you really start to pay attention to the details, especially at that price point around $200, there are some things that can absolutely be improved upon. So there's a little decorative mill line right there. I think there could have been something a little bit more intricately done with that. It also is mirrored on the lock side over here. That's cool too. The lanyard hole right there, it's uniquely shaped. It's not really necessary, but it's there for people that like lanyards. And I suppose it would make sense for a smaller, more compact knife, because some people like having little lanyard fobs or whatever things here at the bottom, just to have a little bit something else to grip while pulling it out of the pocket. For example, like on Chris Reeve knives, a lot of their models come with, I mean, they only have like 4 models, but they only have 2 or 3 folders that come already installed with the paracord wrap lanyard thing, and it's fine. I still think it should be an optional thing without it being, you know, forcefully, you know, installed, and you have to cut it off if you actually don't want it. But I think it should be an optional thing. Having it here, it's out of the way. It's not unsightly or anything. I think it's very well integrated, absolutely. But that's really it. So just, I mean, if this were to be revised, I'd say, you know, do something interesting, because this is a very wonderful blank canvas to be able to do some sort of interesting texturing. And because this is a one-sided dedicated, I'm talking about like a right-sided dedicated folder right here, we do know that Kunwu can do lefties, because they have produced plenty of lefty padres, which is really cool. I say that, you know, this could definitely be a model that could be produced for lefties as well. You know, there needs to be a little bit more lefty love when it comes to stuff like this. They deserve to be able to enjoy, check things out like that as well. So if you're going to be doing a model that is right or left dedicated, if you're going to do texturing, make sure to have the tiniest little flat spot underneath the clip, because if you're going to keep a clip that's just as pinchy and aggressive as this is being retained in the pocket, you don't want aggressive texturing underneath, because it's just going to shred up your pockets. You know, if you have jeans of any kind of quality, if you look at your right or left, you know, front pockets, you know what I'm talking about. So a lot of my pants are pretty fucked up at this point. I don't mind it. I just trim off any little strays that come off. But that's about it. So that's really it. That's all I have to say about this model. I do definitely enjoy using it and actually having it in hand, interacting with it overall. It is relatively comfortable. I do definitely prefer just the flipper tab. The hole, it is tucked away a tiny bit. It is small, it's a little difficult to get to, and it is a little bit awkward because of the overall size of this particular unit. But these are things that I probably wouldn't complain about so much on the larger one. I only have the compact one to talk about and to share with you guys. But I think that this needs to be brought back into the line. It definitely deserves to be brought back, absolutely, the general shape and profile, but just with the tiniest little tweaks and revisions that you would come to expect from the current stuff being produced by Kunwu. So I think that this definitely needs to be brought back, and a lot of people would probably love it if it's given that special sauce that Kunwu is known for nowadays. So that's it. If you guys like this video, I hope you did. Go ahead and leave a like down below if you did. And if you are subscribed, thank you so much. I appreciate all your support and your patience, of course. If you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing, because I have plenty more videos and content coming you guys this way. And with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.